Somebody gets on and
Good afternoon, everyone.
But 이제 네, 들이 Germany 티니바 second time 다디 용백업리아 아니 그래서 다지 토마 달로 아메리카리아 나왔음이리아 네 나왔음이리아 다 visit 체시 침브레 엔 제자 디젤이야 남상 Germany you had this got a cover chair somebody with the tensor.
So this is my second visit to Germany, and just a few short months ago, I was able to visit the United States for the third time, and I was able to actually stay in the United States for almost 3 months. And because of this, I thought to myself that it was probably going to be difficult for me to get the necessary permission to visit Germany right on the heels of that visit to the United States.
And that is surprise chosen the surprise.
But in the end, as we now know, I did get the permission to come to Germany, and from a certain perspective, this was a surprise to me.
That's why things looks like improving a little bit. Then have more courage, encourage somewhere. Then next time, maybe we will try more country. Yeah. Actually, we did try the first time. Because your first Europe trip we planned. That time, I think, 4 or 5 countries. We already tried, but we can try again. And Germany and feeling much comfortable. Because Germany near road. This number China. Tin Tambo, you understand this cancer. Chongbun Roach. Little bit hard. Now it's done much more and more beautiful. German breakfast also tastes good. The lunch looks like breakfast, not much. But the breakfast is good.
Now, during this second visit to Germany, I'm feeling very comfortable in Germany. And in particular, the German language is sounding more and more pleasant to my ears. It has a very nice sound to it. During my first visit, the German language sounded a little bit strange, a little bit rough. But now it sounds very beautiful. And furthermore, the German breakfasts are very delicious. In terms of lunch, it looks mostly just like breakfast, not much to it. But the breakfasts themselves are wonderful.
Germany, Yundusane, Sambakashur Chidi, and lots of greens, right? Taji, Wanjang, the Zishina, the Mamutai, Mara Sambakashur Chigi Yondus. And then I think Germany, Benda, the hotel, the Chashabi, put lots of effort to be green summer Vadaji. Kuyuzungulia tuba, the Bezushdache of Tongo. Chezang, the Germany, Mimare, Tana Singi, Sijun, Tone, and the Kuyuzungyob and Wanjan Zer, the Juan Cheto, Bezuman, Cheveterang, Jesuit.
One of the things that I appreciate about Germany the most is its rich and luscious greenery. There's so much greenery, plant life, trees, vegetation, and so forth in Germany. And in the same way, the hotel that we are staying at and holding this program at puts a lot of effort, as far as I can tell, into being eco-friendly and protecting the environment, having environmentally friendly practices. And more broadly, the German people and the German governments on various levels seem to have put forth a great deal of effort into protecting the environment, and I really rejoice in this.
We need to do lots of things we can. 아주 단동양 제거야 딱 망보십지 망보지 알았어 제투야 근데 안드링이 죄제디 다 고유 숨겹단 대회 다 죄자 드리시레샤 드린주산 디준세테네 대단 대회 토하네 딱 계속 가면 지가시 주의.
And there is a lot more that we can do still to help the environment and protect the environment. And therefore today, how we can further help and protect the environment will be the main topic of my remarks.
Kuyu sungkyopgola 계시두산에 단미망우치기 코랑 지 kuyu sungkyopgola 토난 용고야 다지 kuyu sungkyopgola 토난 용고야 김세 다지 규기현저부터 교랑 게라 데 규기현 가르임 봤지 그때 계셨지 망보용도.
A lot of people ask me these days about my own personal passion for helping the environment and where that came from. What were the causes and conditions that led to me becoming enthusiastic about paying attention to the environment?
당아 그 승교토네 토난 용과 김센 쪼디 다 토난선에 자도 다 텔레아디스 세븐 토나르치 중세 유에데버디 김센 카르스나 아 충중 아랑 깨서디 다 벽이 다 샤쇼 다 롱바 고교 lumba kujo kasa remote place ta dinje kabdi dus jezan de azu traditional chowa ges de ta drongbe ge chowa nomadic dinje chowa ges de jezan kabdi dus ane chi ge da rengjung kuryu dang ta nyeba chene 안 초아게야로 드지게 고급지 좀으로서 지난 뒤주디 뉴뉴지 로드 다 보여야들 좀으로 이내한 디기 파자디 띵사버 쉬쉬야 되지 단다 이내한 디 파자디 띵사버야 되지 전화 용이 도스
I think the main reason for this really was the environment in which I was born and in which I spent the first years of my life. When I was small, I lived together with my family in a remote area of eastern Tibet. And in this area, my family lived a traditional lifestyle of nomads. And part of that lifestyle and part of our situation was that we lived in very close proximity to a very beautiful natural environment. And I feel like that this was an excellent opportunity for me. Even though it was a relatively short time, just 7 years that I lived there, I feel that it instilled deep habitual tendencies that still remain with me to this day.
유럽기 계급 가시기 사찰 레답 시응아 드르체에 드르체 다들 따이네 미장뉴뉴 아주 남 6 million 스가래 다티가 뷰리 유제디 다지 도메인 6 million actually it's not really 6 million 다티 다 치게리에 상원지 도메이나 6 million nearly 6 million 다티 따다를 민베서도 다간다 다 6 지사 다초 마심자 지마도요 말봐 드인두상아도 다 사자 첨부 쉽시요 제 드인두산에 다티 스페이스 쉽지요 제 미상월로리아 정중쿠류리아 롱스죄아다 델리아 에너지게 enjoyable chag space shdayu debchi 드리지샤
As you know, Tibet is a very large area. You could probably fit 4 or 5 European countries in the physical area of Tibet. Even though Tibet is such a large area, there are very few Tibetan people. The figure that we hear most these days is that there are 6 million Tibetans in the world. Actually, it's not really 6 million. I think if you take all of the Tibetans in the world, including those Tibet as well as those who live throughout the world in other places, you'd probably get a total that is almost 6 million. So the 6 million isn't an exact figure, but in any case, with so relatively few Tibetan people in such a very large area of land, this provides the opportunity for the Tibetan people to fully enjoy and greatly enjoy the natural environment that surrounds them. There is, or has been, a lot of space for them to do that.
근데 별이야 다 glaciers 말고 거르망 보시라 해야 되지. 다가날 로 동차 지차 나 동차 제가 세리버 가시 세두산에 벽이 다 거르디줄 데 로치차키 루유에 되지. 다 이제 다 거르데 마위에 되지. 안다나 신기 다지 방종다 신나 신 담에 마위에 다 이제 나나 소시요 니가 진대 인주산의 traditional 소머베다지 수익인 비밀 수익이 셈나로래야 된데비지 강르당 다나 신기다지 저리당 다 가르는 되게다 행동 되게 초단 치고라서 받아들 상로 그주에다지 the living systems and other but landrob지다 루드럽지야 버지 된데지게 간다 그주 디 object 인터뷰지야 다 가서 지금 아주 여기다 가서 펜본을 붙일래야 삼로마다 지지 다디지 간다지 아주 respect 체서를 지다 뉴바이에 대비지 다디지 living system으로 디지털 양지
The glaciers of Tibet, the snow mountains of Tibet, have thousands of years of history behind them. And according to some scientists, some of the Tibetan glaciers have tens of thousands of years of history behind them. So Tibet is very rich in terms of its natural ecosystem and all of the different elements that consists of. The glacier mountains, the meadows, the forests, the lakes, rivers, ponds, springs, and so forth. And all of these elements were related to customarily by the Tibetan people in a way in which they were regarded as a living system, not just an object, not just lifeless matter, but a living system. Tibetans regarded certain elements of the natural environment as being inhabited by gods, nagas, and so forth. So the traditional Tibetan way of relating to this natural environment was one of great respect and one that held the natural environment in awe and regarded the natural environment as imbued with a lot of energy.
구윤안올래야 나는 차로 충분히 인자 이제 구윤안 게 다들이야 차로 충분히 인자 다디 바자르지 쇼심부여지 인상 총계를 나눌래야 다 미망 총계를 나눌 게베 다미 로춘주 망부지기 정중 구유사데 지 TV 당 나나 신기 지 매거진 당 작버다 제나나 바다마도 지금 무엇을 좀 쿠올이야. 저 총뒤네 지 런중 쿠올이야. 다녀지 대하당 델지 런중 쿠 야, 저가 그러다. enjoyable chat 고거르시다. 중요한 말 봐. 제가 that's natural beauties and 안도 야나지 런중 쿠디 자침부 같이 이미사디 전화로 깨야 디스카라 하고
And this is the type of environment that I had the opportunity to grow up in for some time. And the habits of that, the habitual seeds of that, are still with me, I think, in a strong way. However, many people in the world haven't had such opportunities. People, young people, for example, who live in cities, some of them only have a relationship with the natural environment through means of television, magazines, photos, and so forth. But apart from that, they haven't had opportunities to be close with nature in a direct way and to enjoy nature in a direct way. And when we are that distant from nature, in terms of our experience, it becomes more difficult for us to have an appreciation of natural beauty, the beauty of nature, and to have an appreciation of how precious the natural environment is.
근데 안에 Rangjung Kuru Dang, the Namba Sangibi, the Chu Nyamnesum, the Tibur Javasha Yodevici, Java Yodevici. And the Dustane, the Gonda Shivana Singi, Tadang Azuchin, Zumbling Tolia, Serik, the Toneta, information on what's on the Achi. Kulia, needs to condition the information on what's on the Achi. That you been information on we have chat. Miss Hamegi, that been a politician party near Tagana Singi, Chige, Kashre. Social activists, environment activists in our dark Anglo company down Tanaji company the Tamegi who used to give that the catch me, but the Tamaki said the Achi to the Johnny. That in a we need to tola La Lentarvicolia, Caduina Azuchi Ted. Azuki Seven and Sijida, and Azu Samban and Rajavan and Sinji. La Lenk Gavlia, the Yon Tomiachi. Today, information alone is not enough. That the information you have, Leben Nalo, you have a tea, so Ninganalolia, Beji. Sona, so I gave it. Tell La Lenlia country Targo Misadi, Cage Mishado. Telia, that is spiritual tradition, somewhere in Zambolinki. Religious tradition, spiritual tradition, did you detail then they play a role to play. Someone that you delia pentochet to Adamchi. Then they don't say it. Labadoji Nava Sangabaji Binea and Tangi Condition and Sigi, Kuyut and Kuyuki, Sungubdang, Gunjin Bugi, Javayedeva.
Buddhism and the environment are two topics that are connected with each other. As I mentioned earlier, these days there's lots of information that is available to us in the world. And this applies to the environment as well. A lot of information is available in terms of what kind of state the environment is in and so forth. And many people and groups in the world pay a certain degree of attention to all of this information. Political parties express concern about the environment in response to the information that has become available to them. There are many social activists and environmental activists doing various things, raising awareness in different types of ways. Many companies have taken note of the challenges that the environment is facing and have expressed an interest in becoming part of the solution to these problems. And so a lot of different people and a lot of different groups in the world are talking about the importance of the environment. But when it comes to pragmatic solutions and putting them into actual practice, that's more challenging than just talking. So one of the biggest challenges that we face now is how do we translate all of this talk about supporting the environment and being concerned about the environment into pragmatic actions that will actually help the environment. So this shows us clearly that having information alone is not enough. What we need is to first start with the information in our brain, then have that information bring forth some type of a change in feeling in our heart, and then have that change of feeling in our heart be the stepping stone for some type of pragmatic action. It's very important to take it through all the way to that pragmatic action in the end. So in relation to this, I think the various spiritual traditions of the world definitely have a role to play. They definitely can be of benefit in this situation. And especially there is a great opportunity for Buddhism as a spiritual tradition to be of benefit when it comes to protecting the environment and when it comes to the endeavor of trying to sustain the health of the environment.
For example, Sangye, Pena Sangye, Kuchumbe Kalia, and Xingdong Jigchunda Kuchumbu Shegorba. Didn't Sangye Kalia, and Chenshu Jambetron Sangye Bata. And the Jig Chu call it Homer was there. Sida Chansung Long Ridad Nazar Sarnat Ridag Nalia and Chui Klogota. Dana Shingi Yang Devicarina and the Shin Salasad or Shin Salasad. Takada Shini Burulda Yang Devil Jushiorba. Dinanaji Dinan that Chishurdi, the Jig that Yan did she on this.
We can see a strong environmental thread in the life of the Buddha himself. When the Buddha was born, he was born at the side of a tree. When the Buddha attained enlightenment, as is famously known, he attained enlightenment at the foot of the Bodhi tree. When the Buddha first turned the wheel of Dharma, he did so in the Deer Park forest in Varanasi. And similarly, when the Buddha passed into parinirvana or died, it is taught that he did so between two sala trees.
Bena Sangye Negalia. That Sangye the most celebrated Somadaji. Celebrate Chawati. The Kechi Shuruji Sangya to Chadi Orwa. Jazanga Ajasamlana, that Sangye vehicle, Unechana, Mimangbo, very crowded people, lots of people, very crowded, and Lawadab, Kijab, Shujab, Tajaura. Inea Sangye Gala, Koranti, Misuji Mindo, Mimindo. Xingdongji and Zai Denji Digana Koranjibu. Very natural, that very peaceful, quiet, and the Ji Rangjung Kamda Hajan the Chikazwe. Too much is you.
In terms of all of the deeds that the Buddha performed and all of the events connected to the Buddha's lifetime, the most celebrated of all of these is, of course, the Buddha's attainment of enlightenment. Obviously, the full awakening of the Buddha into the state of enlightenment or Buddhahood is considered a very important event. And one might think that due to this, since it was such an important event and momentous occasion, one might think that when that happened, there must have been a big crowd on hand, and the moment when he awakened into Buddhahood, everyone must have burst into applause and cheers and shouts and so forth. But it didn't happen that way. When the Buddha attained enlightenment, when he awakened into Buddhahood, there was no one around. There was no one there. There was just a tree and a grass cushion. It was very natural, very peaceful, very quiet, and very much in touch with the natural environment.
The very ordinary, the thought, just something true ordinary. Some just a Ben Jagala, Xingdong Jigawala. And dating among where sometimes this log and bad and Ningon Kala Sasara, I sing don't all in Yezi did. That didn't mangush that one. Jazang Azuk up did you Sangi said Tid the nearby there. Nazu de Sangi Mahakoma. 2 ordinary. Tiza, they get this Galabro.
So it was a very ordinary event in this way, in terms of the physical setup of how the whole thing happened. And from some perspectives, some people might think it looked too ordinary, because after all, there's lots of people in India who sit under trees. You can look around and see a lot of old people taking naps after lunchtime and so forth under trees. And so if you were walking near the area where the Buddha was attaining enlightenment, you might not even notice that that was the Buddha and he was attaining enlightenment or had just attained enlightenment, because the physical situation he was in was just so ordinary.
We will be disappointed. Not that exciting. Because of that kind of peaceful moment situation, very ordinary situation. Today, you can connect with the universe. And connect with the nature. Connect with all sentient beings. You can then Dana sing game. Great moment for him, for the Buddha.
From our perspective, this might be disappointing, because we might want something more grand and flashy to have occurred, but it seems too ordinary. But from the Buddha's perspective, because of the powerful ordinariness of the moment of his enlightenment, the peace, the quiet, and so forth, he became able to connect with all of the universe. He became able to connect with all of nature, to connect with all sentient beings, and to realize the true nature of all things. So from the Buddha's perspective, the situation of his enlightenment was perfect.
The material desires so disturbed someone with that. Church heavy now, that exciting the chick, as a reward of church. That's a lamsanji, you are of chick, the reward of church. The chick tone, spiritual materialistic, this charge.
Our minds, on the other hand, are so disturbed by material desire that when it comes to Dharma, we're kind of pushed along by our usual habits in a way that we come to expect the Dharma to be exciting, or hope that the Dharma and Dharma practice is going to be exciting or entertaining in some way for us. And that leads us to have an attitude of spiritual materialism.
The picture and example, the picture and
in terms of the way the Buddhist tradition acknowledges the environment, there is the traditional language which refers to the outer environment as a container and the sentient beings as its inner contents. So that's like the picture or metaphor that the traditional Dharma language uses to talk about the relationship between the world or the environment and living beings.
The picture, the example, the yes, natural environment and the connections of it. Pinzi jiggle jigging and java. You have a day. Culturally, turn to Yachi, pay abuchi, read or something.
And this metaphor from the Buddha's teachings is, in my opinion, a wonderful illustration that clearly highlights the mutually dependent relationship that sentient beings and the world have with each other, a mutually dependent connection.
신의 지대인 아주 홀드 좀 치게 해지다. 다지 아주라 가수해지. 가수 아주지 object 잡지 많이 붙이. 다 간단 아주 숨겹치기 홀드 치게 해지. nurturing 치게 해지. There's tongdos.
So the outer environment, which is a container, is similar to a hall, but not a hall in the sense of just being a lifeless object, a hall as a living entity that we must protect.
Today, do chi nu telia, gun chumbina, nang ju telia, ko nyanga yongorwa, the nyanga yongoyabti, as a savage hakodachi.
And if this outer container is harmed, then its contents will be lost. That is very clear. If you have a container that is holding something and harm comes to the container, then it's very clear that what the container is holding will be lost.
Adrian Yuzana, 땅에 망보치 가수라지 구육 순교 토할래다 망보치 체리다 튠베기 깨지 망보시의 식문다 지가란지 체리도 시라라 오츠시다 좀으로 안데 시라라데 데데데 딱한당 다진 거주시야데 간데 좀으로서나 지당게 나란지 구육 순교래야 초와르시 초난 깨고비 균생 가리면데 간수지 쉬브래 다드네 나랑기 다지 넘버 3기변 땅 언제 구순교기 냠내서 니버든 대바로 컨트리버디 도두르지 간솔이야 쉬브래 나중에 알아 섬줄도 쉬브래.
In terms of talking about the environment from a scientific perspective, this is something that I really can't do much of because I don't know the science in depth, and I don't perfectly have a perfect understanding of the science that I know from a scientific perspective. So what I've tried to focus on mostly today in my remarks is my own personal sense of why it is reasonable to have a feeling of concern toward the environment, as well as the natural connection that I feel is present between environmental concern for the environment, and the practice of the Buddha Dharma. And I've tried to share my thoughts about these topics with you in a brief manner.
자사데 내라브렘 데 내라브렘 가르스나 다디 아주기 living style 아주 초와 계단단 저것이다 되지 당 아주 더 kum지에 되베기 지 habits으로다 다 대단 저버야 되지 근데 다디 subject 잡거나 it's quite painful, it's quite not so easy. And then did Yomr Serlia? That's tell ya the country improve chat. Gulong is the shoot, so much goes around. Gulong, never shivaji goes around. That put strength, spirit, that shivaji goes around. That they could do son, that he going to shiva and sing you. information along the ngazulia understand the kaswe koarji nye to rete ina ngone tsanege da kulong shuge this that you want this kala simshu pal in jimiji realistic tinde thoanda chonang gya ji da nijigi be kasweta 초왕 우여르지 영아지야 근데 배주셔 가야 돼 검지 돼야 돼 계속 시다 있어서
However, protecting the environment is really not an easy thing to do. And the reason this is the case is because it really comes down to our lifestyle. And this issue is very much connected with our day-to-day habits. And if we examine those and find that they need to change, then the process of actually changing our day-to-day lifestyle and our day-to-day habits can be painful, can be not such an easy thing to do. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of information, but information alone isn't enough. We need to actually transform our motivation and further empower our motivation to help the environment, to give much more spirit and robust energy to that motivation of helping the environment. And that can be a challenging process. So to really and genuinely transform our relationship with the environment, I think it's important to work on our motivation.
That the need to greed that control that the cheeky benefit benang TV denandra the advertisement someone as a greed yagi to shoot shut down the chairs are social control chat. So kumdi chabre the control chat. Dona ji ngazulia une goya karimba. Need and want similar. What is really need? What is just want? That the kabar cheche. That is some doa chidang. Tangon dona tangis devana sink. Kashwe ning dom jumsi maybe na and taje to mano. And taje madonna, you are down to maro. And then do 가져다. 다들 저기 되게 인도 보고.
So really it comes down to controlling our own greed. If we look at what's coming at us from the media, from television, advertisements, and so forth, a lot of what's coming at us is basically an attempt to increase our greed. And so if we want to control our greed or to reduce it, then we really need to take that responsibility on for ourselves and recognize that others aren't going to reduce our greed for us. We need to reduce our greed ourselves. We need to transform our habits ourselves. So a part of this process of transforming our habits is that we need to look into the distinction between what we really need and what we simply want. So there's a difference between what we need and what we want, and I think we can put more work into making that distinction more clearly. And in order to do that and continue along with that practice, we need great strength of heart, great resolve. If we don't have great resolve, we won't be able to be decisive. And if we're not decisive, we won't be able to make changes.
단 전에를 진실해다. 고유고를 망부지. 단 망부지 시에는 쳐갑니다. 와서 이제 Sometimes just share the mantra, lalenda the nyongcha. The name you san the Tujuma was so wrong as Chido. The name you san Ara Araina, Sheva Buranina, Tajik Kashre, the Lale, Manza Tarquan, the Chitondo, the Samology, Tanashin Kashre. Lale Manzi Tartoaji, Susu Nube Kanjo, Nimerji Nalolea, and Jin that Kashoji Chui Tigba someone drop, then I sing that on the Chuti Savan I sing. Nimerji Nalology, Susu Nube Kanjo Chavimina, then the Sancho and you are positive. Kasho that you change on to her to put something those.
So it's like that. And I think that it's good for me not to say too much more, because I think sometimes we have a habit of saying too much and doing too little, and we just end up wasting time. And I feel that even from my own perspective, even from the perspective of the person who's giving this talk about the environment, I feel that there's more that I can and should do to actually help in terms of my own actions. And I would also encourage you to try to increase your actions that help the environment in a way that harmonizes with your own abilities, and in a way that you bring those actions into your life day to day. So I think that if we can change our actions on a day-to-day basis in accordance with our own abilities, then our actions will accumulate like drops of water accumulating, drop after drop, and that we will definitely contribute to a positive change.
That is sunny Minjuba is by Rava. Sunny the Minjube Goliaji Shais, Nani Minjube Wang. They want the one Guina, and the Lungmida. And the Riajuku, and the Yanga this those of Tengaradi. Kazawa, yes, the Ante Lungchas. That the one the teacher and Yangaruda. The day the one to Guya Tepsi.
For tomorrow's teachings, we will focus on the topic of the Buddha Akshobhya, and the day after tomorrow, the empowerment of Akshobhya will be conferred, and I can say at this time that it will be an actual empowerment, not just a transmission, as we had with Avalokiteshvara. So I want to be careful and note this, because otherwise some people might think that, well, we were promised an empowerment for Avalokiteshvara, but it was just a transmission. And maybe there's a danger that when promised an empowerment of Akshobhya, it will just become a guiding instruction. So when it comes time to give the Akshobhya empowerment, it will be an actual empowerment, and I will try my best to do the actual, genuine empowerment of Akshobhya.
The Akshobhya the engine and immovable said Gurmde. This just program now. Akshobhya or immovables. That is Kinsardo. Akshobhya Sana, Mima, which is Pajihakomanda, Akshobhya, Sanskrit, Akshobhya Lara, Akshobhya Avatar, maybe Avatar this singer also, Avatar Longin Tezan. Tako alien inside some Tengra, that is an Akshobhya Avatar, maybe it's alien Tengra. Yina immovables are there. The Kenzar is the this all the Akshobhya Sadi Kashenan turned out Guru on this. shedang yorwa midang wasa she midang wasa shedang me wasa ji semdi shedang gi gyu mi chu wasa midang wasa le ji gyu do de ku ju chim do sa so de quran ki min chu ba quran min chu ba la kwa yun zeng khara sa na quran gi da sang gi min chu ba quran gi 당부 전주도 투기에 걸려야 니네 전주 마도 기바도 심진 수려야 시당 그 삼바 기가 민체제 된데가 담제 제압 인사 될 때는 민주가 사도 정도 이 뉴스 시험이 당마사로 시당이 민주가 사도 되지 좋나 그래서 고아르시 하면 로서 되지도.
So in terms of the word akshobhya, it's been translated in our programs that have been distributed, the brochures that have been distributed for this program as immovable. And I thought that was interesting to see that description in English. The full name of akshobhya sometimes in Sanskrit is given as akshobhya avatar, which and many people might be familiar with the concept of avatar from having watched the movie Avatar. But the akshobhya part, if we look at the real meaning of that term, I think it comes closer to being undisturbed. And the main reference in that context is being undisturbed by aggression or anger. One's mind is not disturbed by aggression or anger. And I think that understanding has deep meaning to it. The reason why the Buddha Akshobhya came to be named as such, if we look at Akshobhya as bearing this meaning of non-aggression or not being disturbed by aggression, not being shaken by anger, it's because when the Buddha Akshobhya in his previous lifetimes, when he first gave rise to the wish for enlightenment, he made a firm pledge or commitment saying, from now onward until the time that I am enlightened, I will not harbor any aggressive intentions toward any sentient being, any intention of anger or hatred toward any sentient being. And therefore, when he attained Buddhahood, he became known as the Buddha whose mind is not disturbed by anger, the Buddha who is not shaken by hatred, the Buddha who is unmoved by aggression. That's all for today. Thank you.